Hello everybody. In the past video we learned how to build a database engine based on JSON module in Python, and today we are going to learn how to build our own web framework based on WSGI. And this framework is only basic and meant for learning purposes, no complex stuff, and so I am sure it will get us going. Now to get started, I am going to create a module called eWeb, and then we are going to have basically four files here. We are going to handle routing system. We are going to find a way to get some parameters into a request object, and then we are going to create the app object itself and some response objects. Let's start with the app. Now in WSGI, an app is just a callable that accepts two parameters, an environ and then a start response. The environ looks almost like a dictionary, and the start response is a function. Now, so a simple WSGI application would be like app environ start response, and then you do whatever you want with the data. In our case, we are going to build it with an object-oriented approach, and so we are going to have to make a class for it. So create a class app. In the init function, well, for now we are going to pass, but to handle the issue of it being a callable, our callable will have to implement this underscore call function, and it will take in environ and start response. Please don't miss the order, very important. And for now we are going to pass. So this is a simple WSGI application. You can get it from the docs as well. You can check the WSGI documentation. But when these things are given, it's difficult to ask the end user to just grab what they need from it. So for the majority of time, we are going to need to extract those into an object of our kind. So we create a request object. So we create a class called request. Initializing it, we take in that environment and the same start response in hopes that it will be passed in from the app. And then we are going to extract the parameters we need from the environment and start response. Majority of the stuff we are going to extract, so we save an instance of the environment itself, and then we keep these attributes. So you extract the HTTP host, HTTP user agent, the language, the request method, the pass info, HTTP post, gateway interface, server port. So all we are doing is extracting those into a more user-friendly variable declarations over here. Now we also need to pass the query sets that are sent to our endpoint. So let's create a function called pass query set. Now to pass query sets, query sets are more or less like the get parameters that are sent. So in now pass. Now query sets are part of the request route. So for instance, let me bring this doc string here. If somebody is requesting a website like google.com/ maybe search/ and then there is a question mark with something like search term or whatever, or maybe search equals Kofi, something like this. So whatever comes after that question mark, those are the things we want to pass. Okay, those are the things we want to pass. Those are our queries. Now to pass them, these are not sent when we have a post object. So we check if self.request self.method is a post. If it is a post method, if it is not a post method, instead, sorry, if it is not a post method, then we are going to return. There is no need to pass. Shit, fuck me. So we are going to so we need to find a way to pass the query sets that are more or less like the post body that is sent. So we are going to use our own special function that we will name pass query set. Then we create it, and these query sets request bodies are generally sent only in post request, and we are going to assume that way. So first you are going to make sure that if the method is not a post request, then we are just going to return. There is nothing to search for. But if it is, well, let me make a copy of the environment just for a little efficiency, and we are going to need the help of CGI, the command gateway interface. It has this awesome function there called fill storage. Is very useful in passing such objects, and there is no need to rewrite them again. So let's just import it from the top. So import CGI, and then we are going to use it over here. Just say our fill storage CGI.fill storage, and this fill storage takes in this FP, which will be our environment WSGI.input. These are in the WSGI specification. So then we are also going to need a copy of the environment also, and then we also need to keep enable keep blanks. Well, it's true. Well, let's just assume this place is the blank box, and let CGI do its work, and then we move on to our own stuff. So after this fill storage does its magic, we just come and check for every item in the fill storage the list. Then if the item does not have a file name, we simply need to set a post data. So how do we set this post data? Well, now let me just put a pass here and then think through. In order to save post data, I think it's a good idea to create a separate object to handle those stuff. So we would go right up anywhere and just create a post, an object to hold all those post parameters, everything. I'll name mine post body, and I think it's a nice name to use. So it takes itself and some data it wants to save. The data in this case you want to be a dictionary. So we just say self.data equals data. Then we need a way to get the data from it. So you give it a key, then you get some results, just like we did in the dictionary approach, where we just try to get the value. And if the value does not exist, we want to pass in a list with just a string. So we check if the value we are going to get over here is a string, then we need to pass it. If the type of value is a string, if the type of value is a string, then we need to pass the value before we send it. A way of escaping these errors. And also some characters cannot be encoded properly in a URL request, and so they are replaced, things like a percentage sign and the rest, underscores, dashes. So well, we don't want to worry ourselves with all of those magic. We let CGI do it for us. So we just set the value to CGI dot escape the value, so we escape all this stuff. And this is also good for handling a few attacks on websites. So well, it's an important feature. And finally, we return the value. We also need a way to set values. So define set self. We need a key and a value. This looks familiar from our dictionary instance, and then we just need to do self.data key equals value. Very simple over there. Just set the value. And well, sometimes a user may want to iterate over these values, so let's just create an underscore iter function so that they can do something like a follow, a yield statement. So for key value is self.data, just yield key value. And that is all for our post body. And we are going to use this to store all our post data, everything. So for our form data, form inputs, there's things in it, like maybe you have a field called name, it will come here as the key being name, and then the value corresponding to the value from the value the user sent over. So now that we have that in place, saving these items is not very difficult. If only the item has a file name, we just need to save it. Now to save it, we need to create a post body instance. So yeah, we say self.post is equal to, so let's create post body, and the data, let's initialize the data with just an empty dictionary, and then we are just going to do self.post.set. So we are going to set, and remember we need the name and the value, so that item's name and then the item value. Now if the item has no file name, we just need to do self.post.set, and then we set the item name, but this time we just set it to item. And that is all for our request instance. Everything we need to do to handle request instances, and that is all. Just this simple. Well, in actual sense, in production ready frameworks, is going to probably be more than this, but well, we will take this. I think this is worth it. Now web frameworks also need routers or routers, So they simply match request paths to some function that is going to handle the request. In our case, our request path, we don't want to build trees or uh, any complex things for it. We are just going to base them on strings. So let's create a router. So a router or router is just a class that accepts in some routes. In our case, we expect the routes to be a list or a set of something. So we just set self.routes is equal to list of routes if routes else empty list. So we didn't pass the empty list as the default value here because a list is not a simple data structure, and so passing it here we'll be getting some sort of magical errors, and we don't want to do that. And if we have the routes, all we need to do is to find a way to add routes. We have the router. All we need to do is to find a way to add routes and to check if a route exists. Now, my approach, I choose to make sure that the routes themselves, the paths themselves, do the checking. So I'll create a class called a path. It takes itself in its initializer, then it will take in a path, which is a string, and then func, which is a callable, a function. Now we are not doing type annotations here because this will take us a long time, and all we need to do is save the path and then save the function also. And then when we are asked to check, we'll be given a path and we are asked to check whether, hey, you are a path, now check and see whether you match this. All we just need to do is if self.path is the same as this path, then return true, else return false. Now this is super simple, so we won't be able to do magic stuff like do something like Django style where you do maybe item slash integer id slash. No, we won't be able to do that. Everything needs to be hard coded. That is the unfortunate part of our framework, but again, we are just learning. We are not building production ready frameworks. Now with this, we also need a way to add a route. So define add route or add path self, and it will take in a path which is going to be the same as of this class path over here. So the path is going to take, the simple thing we need to do is, since the routes, the self.routes is a list, we're just going to append this path into it. We could choose to implement it as a set to avoid duplicates, but then we are not worrying about the complexity, just the understanding. And then we also need a way to check the routes from the router. When a request comes in, it goes into the router sees, oh, which of my guys is ready to handle this, which one does this correspond to. So we need to handle that. So define get route, or you could also name it match, and we are going to take in a path in this case, which is a string. And well, let me make this path so for route, in the routes, if the route matches, if the route matches this path, that is over here. If it checks and it returns true, then all we are going to do is return. Sorry, why do I keep typing path? What we are going to do is return the function associated with that route. Else we simply return none. And that is all for a router. Very simple. Most of these stars are simple things, except implementing them on a larger scale will make them complex. So when you go into and you look at, say, the code base for Django or Flask, you may see these magical stars, but well, we are handling the basics. Oh, and it seems I did not put the router in the eWeb folder, so I'll just drag it over. Boom, move it. It's gone. So now we have a router, we have a request, we have an app which we've not built completely, but then let's just build a way to send responses and then we'll bring all of them together in the app. As I already said, the app file, the application instance, is going to bind all of these things as one. So let's finish with the separate items and then we can put all of them together. So now let's handle responses. So our idea of responses is that we pass values to them and they send the values back to the client. That is the most basic idea of a response object, and that is exactly what we are going to do. So from this eWeb folder, we are going to import request. From the request file, we are going to import requests, and then we also, no, we are not going to handle JSON responses. I'll leave that as a project for you to do. Yeah, so all we need to do is just a simple response object. So a response object needs to be able to take in some response, maybe a string or whatever the user wants to send, and then pass them. It needs to also send a status code in the rest. So we need a request object, which is an instance of request, and then we need to also take in our status code, and I'll leave the default of our status code to it's 200. Okay, let me just leave it that way so that they will be passed in by default. And then we also need to take in the content type, which is also a string. So if you are sending HTML, content type will be text/HTML. If you are sending a video file, it will be different. Now when these are sent, we need to, this thing needs to also have headers. The start response function we talked about before mostly is used to send headers, and I think just in this file I like to use a little bit type annotation. I miss you. That was a joke. Yeah, this needs to be a string, this also needs to be a string, and this needs to be a list. Oh, please don't think it's inconsistent, please. I like to do it. So we just set status code. So we are just setting all these stuffs as so the start response, which is a callable. So from typing word callable, which is a callable. Callable is just a function, and it's going to be request. Remember, we store the start response function in the request object, so it's going to be request dot start response, and we also store the content type. and from here this content type, which is a string. Let me bring the type. I need to put that type there. Then we also need the content to be stored. The thing about WSGI is that the response to be sent, the thing she sent to the client needs to be an iterable of bytes. So that is why the content to be sent needs to be a list. Then I'll create a helper function called make response, and all this make response should do is it needs to start the response. Now this is where we use this function. So you send in the status code, so you tell the server, hey, this thing is a 404 not found, or this thing is 200, okay, and that is going to be a string. Then you also need to pass in an iterable here, and it will contain keys like you pass in content type. These are basically headers. Headers are tuples of two contents. You can assume the first is a key, the second is a value, but they are tuples, not dictionaries. So this is the entirety of what that start response function we receive in our app object is going to be doing. It just sends the status code and some headers, if there are any headers, and then we return the response content, which is the job. I think, should I rather just pass in the headers over here? Well, let's just do it this way, and later on we can modify it. So let me do it this way. This should be the headers, and then I'll pass in my self.headers over here. So this is more or less like the default header. If you have anything else, add. So this is all our response. Now we could subclass it to create text like a JSON response, so that it will encode the response content to JSON before sending them. Then maybe an HTTP response for returning sample strings and data, maybe a template response for rendering template and the rest. But well, let's start with HTTP response. And they all need to inherit from response object, as you guessed, and also needs to take in a request, just like its parent, and then it needs a content and status. I think I should make this any, but well, let's assume now the status code by default here is 200, okay, and notice that it's a string with a number and then a string, a number and then some set of characters defining what it is, and there are many. So we have 400 not found, 302, 301, and the rest. They are many. It gets over your head, so you may need to check the cheat sheet for that. Just Google HTTP responses and you'll find so many of them. Now when we have this, we just want to initialize the parent, which is the actual response object. So we'll pass in the request. We'll also pass in the status code, and with the content type, we pass in the content type. I think I forgot to take in content type here. Oh god. Now I'll set my content type default to text/html because it's most common. You can set it to different thing. I think HTML is good. So to actually make response, we just check If the type of the content is a string, then we just change everything into bytes. You can't send strings over the network. You need to send everything into bytes. Then we save this. Into this response content over here. So the response content, the append content. That is it. Okay, if type of content is not equal to bytes, then content equal to bytes. Oh, is there a way to do this conversion? Well, maybe not really necessary. So let's just tell our users, please, when you pass in the content, make sure it's a string. Oh shit. And this is why it's becoming very useful to use type annotations here, because many people will interact with these objects, and it's nicer if they know the type they need to deal with. Now you can create stuff like JSON responses. So for instance, a JSON response will just be the same. You just copy this, you paste, then you rename, and then all you need to do is over here, rather than just checking if the thing is a string, we know it might be a string. So all you need to do is that you set a content, the content to be json.dumps, and then you just convert everything sent, whether byte or I didn't import JSON, so let me see. Fix. I import JSON, and we are done. That is all. We just implemented JSON response straight away, no difficulty. And for a JSON response, our response is not going to be text/html, it's going to be application/JSON. So you can do the same thing for template response. For a template response, all you need to do is open a file, read from it, and then return it. Now I am going to choose to create one error handling response, and that will be http 404. Okay, let's implement an error response. So that all error responses will inherit from it, but in this case we are going to create only and only 404. So it will take in a request an error code, like here we took in status code, here we are taking in error code, but it's basically the same thing. And then we are going to initialize the parent. By default, we are going to use 404 not found, and then we are going to, the content type is going to be text/html. I think that is it. Then we are going to set the let's leave it this way. Then when we create the HTTP 404 response, it will inherit from error response because it's an error. And it will just take in the request objects. All it needs to do is initialize the parent with the request object, and then with a string that says 404 not found. That is it. Then we just need to also set the response content. So we append, I think we need to append the 404 not found, but it needs to be bytes. So 404 not found, then we include it. That's not capital, just for consistency's sake. And that is all. We are done with creating response objects. Oh, how come my response object is also not in this folder? So we are done with creating response objects. Now we can add everything together in this app. So first we are gluing them all together, so we need to call them. So we need to import the request from eweb.request, import the request object from eweb.response. We need the HTTP 404 response and other ones, but let's just stick to this. Then from eweb the router, import router. So whenever we create a new app, we just set as router to a new instance of a router with no routes, and then we just need to deal with how the underscore call works. And that is the heart of the whole issue. So when this underscore call is called, well, many things can go wrong. So we are going to use a try except block. We are going to put all our code in here. So first we need to create a request object. So we will create a request object which is going to be request, and then we pass in this environment and then start response, just like we define it to be. Then we also need to take in, I think I need to bring type annotation to the whole project. So request. We also need to take in we also need to check the route that is being requested. So we just see the function we are requesting is the route, what the router gets. So we get route, you put in the path request.path, and then we see if the function is not none, that means we matched the path. We are going to say that the response, which is a response, is the result of passing the request object to the function. In this case, we are saying that every function needs to return an object that is an instance of response. So like the JSON response, the HTML response, or any other child object we create from it. And then when we do, remember we created a function called make response, so we just call it response.make response, so that it will send every content to the client. But if the function does not exist, well, if it doesn't, we simply need to return HTTP 404 not found. Yeah, we need to return an HTTP 404 not found to specify that, well, that thing is not there. So we create an HTTP 404 object with a request, and then we ask it to make a response. And that's it. But if it is found, we leave it that way. If it is not, we do this. Now, if there happens to be an exception also, we need to do the same thing. Do the same thing. Okay, so I created my response outside the try except, so it's giving, my editor is giving me this warning, so I'll just move it up a bit, just one step a bit. We may also need to print out the exception. Now the thing is, over here there are tons of exceptions that can happen, and this can be from division by zero, whatever, and most of the exceptions will happen over here in this func request. That is where most of the exceptions are going to happen. So we simply want to make sure that whatever exception it is, we are taking charge of it, like you are handled. And whenever a request comes in, let's just print something, so maybe an F string, incoming request of path, something like this. And just as a demonstration, I would also love to print this environment for you to see, and it's actually going to be a huge dictionary. Well, let me see, is this okay? Yeah, I think it is. But there's also the need to be able to set routes. We can ask the user to interact with this router objects, but let's assume it's a private property, and let's say define set routes, where the user gets to send in a list of routes, which is just a list margin, and then so that is it. You pass in a list of routes, it adds the routes to the router or the router. Now it's time that we test this thing and see. I'll come outside here. Okay, come outside here, and then I am going to create a file. I'm going to create a file, maybe example.py, and then for this example.py we are going to try to make a simple response and see, will it work, will it not work, did we get an error, is our work worth it, and the rest. So just say from web.app import app. Whoa, app, please work. Okay, well, I think I'm getting this error because of this whole folder stuff, because there is no underscore in the py here, but I just thought it wasn't really necessary. But let's see if it solves that type hinting problem. Hey, oh, I use for instead of from. So we import app, then from eweb dot router import path, and then from eweb dot response we need to import http response. Then let's see, we need an app which is going to be app. Then we also need functions. So define hello world. It will take in the request from eweb request import request, and it needs to return a response object. It will also take in the request, and then it will take in a string as content. I'll return hello world, and the status code by default is 200. Okay, and I think that is good. So that is it. Now to run this we need a WSGI server, and the module WSGI reference ref comes with a simple WSGI server, and we are going to use that to do the majority of our bidding. So from WSGI.simple server import make server. Now we just need to do server equals make server. It takes in the hosts. I'll set that to 127.0.0.1, and a port I'll set that to 8000. The port needs to be a number, sorry, 8000, and then it needs the WSGI application, which is going to be our app. And when we have it, we say server dot run forever or serve forever. Run. Oh shit, forgetting this. Server dot. Okay, let me highlight on it and see. Server dot. Why isn't my type in terms coming? Okay, let me look it up in just a sec. So server dot serve forever. Oh, sorry. So we serve forever, and that is it. Now, but we haven't added this function as a route to this app, so we just need to create routes. So it's a list that takes in path objects. So we have a path slash, and this will go to hello world. Just this. It looks almost similar to Django's way of handling routes. You can put all routes in a list, and then Django will check it out. Now let's see if this will work. Let's cross our hands. Oh, sorry, I need to close this terminal and then rerun it. Is the server running? Well, let's see. 127.8000. Well, a server error occurred. Let's see that error that happened. Why is the error? HTTP 404 object has no attribute content type. So self.content type. So it means we made a mistake over here. Let's check our response object. See, content type string equals content type. Okay. So we just need to move this down a bit, and close it. Rerun. So I think the error was because we tried to access the content type before we actually initialized it, and that is a crime. Is that another error? Is that another error? Oh, sorry. I wonder, but this seems to be stuck somewhere, and we are getting the same server error again. So let's see. It's saying non-type object is not a trouble. Incoming request slash favicon.ico. Well, we don't want to deal with any favicon.ico, so that is none of our business. But you can see over here, this is how our environment object looks like. This is how our environment object looks like. So I'll just remove that from the printing since you've seen it. It contains all these attributes: server port, remote host, and the rest. So I'll take that from here and save it. I'll close, then I'll rerun because oh sorry. So as soon as it runs, let's print in this example.py. Let's print server running on port 8000. Oh, so I looked into finding what caused the error, and I realized I missed a return statement here and a return statement here. So I simply need to close the server. Okay. Now it's running on localhost 8001, and it's saying not found here. And I also noticed that here when I created this route, I did not add a route to the app, so I needed to do app.set routes and then pass in this routes, but I forgot to do that. My bad, and I'm sorry. So let's run this again and see if it will work. Right now it's running on localhost 8001 and it works. Right, there's no hot reload feature, so if you do anything crazy, you need to send it back yourself. So I could simply send some HTML here instead. Let me use triple. I could send HTML body, end of the body, end of HTML. Then for the body, I can put in HU hello world, and let's see if it works. So I'm running this and reloading. Oh, it's bold, which tells us that HTML actually works. So as a project, you could try to add different kinds of responses. Like I could send in a JSON response over here, and for a JSON response, I'll pass in the request and I'll send some data, which we denoted it as string, but it can be almost any object. Where I'll say hello world 1 is to 2 and the rest, and then I can just close this server, rerun it, and on the same route, I got a so turns out when we did our JSON.downs, we forgot to convert it to bytes. So for our JSON response, after doing this JSON.downs, you can just do an encode. Then we can delete this, go back, rerun our example.py, and see. So yeah, we have our JSON data like just as we hoped for. And I think that would be it for today, except well, there are lots of type annotations we could add, but we are not going to do that. And I'm going to post a link to a working example on my GitHub page, which is on github.com/jote/joeweb. I built about a year or 2 years ago, and I hope it will be of help. And I hope this gets to inspire you to dive deeper into bigger frameworks. Thank you very much, and see you again another time.